Brisbane taking on the Melbourne Storm. Obviously, Brisbane at home, but have lost 13 in a row against them. And let's have a look at the ins and outs, which are huge, obviously coming off that last week's game. Reynolds and Carrigan both returned. Staggs back from a one-game suspension. Arthur's to start. Interesting one there with Oates being dropped, and we'll talk about that a little later on. Hughes, Grant back in the starting team, and Pappenhausen selected on the interchange as expected. Now, this sets up to be an absolute blockbuster, and it's so important because whoever wins this is on the opposite side to Penrith in the draw. Whoever loses will therefore move over and will need to beat Penrith if they are to get to a grand final. The significance of this is huge.
Massive.
Yeah, I think for the Broncos, Gordon touched on it, the hoodoo. You can't ignore this. This goes back to 2009, Brisbane's last win against the Storm at Suncorp Stadium, and the players can say, well, it's a different generation, and you know, we don't look at the history. It's there for a reason. Melbourne have found a way to make this personal for so long, going back to Bellamy, going back to Cameron Smith and Billy Slater and all the players, Cooper Cronk not getting invited by the Broncos to be a part of it, and it's gone through the generations. Now you've got Munster and Harry Grant, and it just continues on, and for some reason they've got the Broncos measure.
It's huge. I think it's a real mental hurdle for the Broncos players. Boys, you've been there. Like, surely that starts to play a factor when they're chasing 14 straight against you. 14.
It would if it was an old squad and a lot of those guys were carrying their divots. This is like Carrigan wouldn't have been in a lot of those. Probably Corey Oates is the only one. He's been left out. He's been there for 10 years. He would have been involved in a lot of those games. A lot of the other guys haven't been involved for those 6 or 7 years. They're they're fresh. So yes, you know the history's there, but you make your own, and they don't carry the battle scars. You wouldn't imagine.
I think subconsciously you do, because you know when you try not to think about something, you often think about it, right? And whether you want to try and, I mean, they'll take it on Brisbane. They're a much better team, and I don't expect it to affect them. But, you know, you can't run away from it. You can't ignore it. Hoodoos exist for a reason. There's obviously, they've got the better of them, the style in which they play and the confidence that they get every time they do beat them. It grows for that next encounter. I know when I played, there was just some teams that you just had the edge over, and you couldn't really pinpoint why. But every time you played them, you were just confident that you were going to win. Now, Reece Walsh plays with plenty of confidence on the field, and he wasn't lacking it when he fronted the cameras this morning.
Do I fear the Storm? No, I don't. Sitting those 3 games out that I did, and, you know, one being Origin was a pretty big game, and I was obviously disappointed in that. But, you know, being in the position and the role that I play in the team, it's really infectious among the group, the way I carry myself on the field. Like, you know, being a spine member, people need to look at you and trust your voice, your decisions and everything that you do. And, you know, sometimes me losing my head isn't the best thing for the team. And, you know, obviously I'm still young and I'm still learning. I'll probably still have some snaps in me every now and then. But, you know, I find myself pull myself back a little bit more. And, you know, the leaders in the team are helping me in that area of my game a lot more.
Believe in hoodoos, or
what's that? Sorry?
Believe in hoodoos or anything like that, or
what does that mean?
You don't
No, I know what it means. I know what it means. No, I don't.
He's a confident kid, Reece, and so he should be after the epic season that he's had, and that's what you want to see, you know, out of your players, bouncing around, and he's been doing it all season, and he just continues to get better with every game. Now, another confident player in that team and an experienced premiership player is Adam Reynolds. Now, he really holds the key to this team, doesn't he? And if he has a big game, well, over the next month, they're a chance of winning a comp.
For sure. Like, Adam has been absolutely brilliant. He's been one of the key figures that's turned it all around for the Broncos. I do worry a bit the fact that he hasn't played for a few weeks. I think, you know, he goes in a little bit rusty and you just don't know what might be. He's been there in the big moments and he's played well in big games, but yeah, I think that's a bit of a concern.
For everything we've just spoken about, hoodoos and, you know, this unbelievable record that the Melbourne Storm have, it's down to players like Adam Reynolds to settle it all down for the Broncos, and this is what he was bought for.
Absolutely. This is the moment for Adam Reynolds, right? So we saw when he wasn't there, they played against the Cowboys and everything ticked over and they could get the job done. And it's a totally different side than when Adam walked in. But they bought him for this moment.
Yeah.
You know, finishing off the sets, the professionalism, Reece Walsh pulling in, because everybody's going to call plays. They'll get a bit excited. This is where you want your experience to step up, right? So this is what they've bought him for. So there is a fair bit of pressure on him. But I think having the rest with the experience, if he was a younger guy, it may have hindered him. But you think it should help someone with that much experience.
I'm just keeping an eye on the Corey Oates decision, guys. He's like a 200 gamer, right? And we talk about this record and experience and that atmosphere that's going to be what it will be at Suncorp. And a player like Jesse Arthurs comes into the side, a wonderful talent, no doubt. Corey Oates, so much experience, has been there in big games. Guys, he's also off contract, right?
Is he?
And I'm really interested to see.
Is he dropped?
Well, he has. He's been overlooked.
So Arthurs didn't play last week. He was injured, right?
Yep.
So it is.
He has been checkered with
played-
injuries. He has had a
shifted
few injuries
position last
Shift
week.
the position. Okay.
around the origin because the way he started the season, Corey Oates had wound back the clock. And I think the way Arthur's, I think they've gone for speed. And that's the rumours coming out of Brisbane, right? And speed is a luxury in the game at the moment.
And maybe confidence too. And even back on Adam, one thing I wanted to say there too, that he's had almost a faultless season. But I was thinking about it today, and the one thing that came back into my mind about Adam's season was when I and many others were calling for him to be in the New South Wales team for Game 2. And I remembered that game against the Knights. There was a lot of talk and a lot of expectation and pressure, and it was probably the one game this year where I thought he started a little bit off. His kicking game wasn't quite right. There was a few wayward passes. I think he got burnt by Ponga at one point, and he actually came back and showed his championship qualities and scored the winning try. But it was just a moment where I just thought to myself, you know, like he's got to face up to that pressure too this week, and he's got to aim up.
Yeah, I think he's all class, and I believe that he will crawls. But you're right, like, and you two hit the nail on the head. This is why they bought him. This is exactly, not to win games throughout the season. Of course, he's been amazing, and what he's brought off the field to the club, you can't replace. So I'm not by any means suggesting that he hasn't added a lot of value to the team, but they bought him to win a premiership. So he knows that this is the time. This is his time. It's their time. These opportunities don't come around that often. Who knows what happens next year? What do you think, Gord? He's going to get the job done?
Well, he has to, right? So, like, there's talk and there's been articles in the paper that it is like he the best buy, and then, you know, they had a list and it was Kevin Walters because he'd won the most, and then Glenn Lazarus, and there's like, and then if he wins a competition, this could be as important as the Kevy and the Glenn Lazarus, like the buys, because it's been a long time between drinks. He'd been bought, like remember they had all the shiny toys and they had no steering wheel, so he got brought there, and it's his time to shine. It is all, like believe it or not, he's got to put his hand up in the next month of footy. He's got a month to get him home.
Well, it was interesting that Adam had a little crack back at South Sydney as far as his own level of confidence and where he's at right now with this Broncos team, suggesting as such that are the opinions that were around 2 years ago about whether he could continue to play at this level, do they still exist now that I'm here?
Well, he can answer that over the next few weeks and prove South Sydney wrong and prove the Brisbane Broncos right. The Storm have won their last 13 games against the Broncos at Suncorp Stadium, but Cameron Munster insists there's no complacency within the squad.
So I'm sure they know all about the history or how many games we haven't lost at Suncorp, but at the end of the day, it's only a record. All records are meant to be broken, so we just got to go out there and play our style of footy and can't really focus too much on what the records all say in the history books. But if we go out there and play the style of footy we know we can play, we can obviously have a really good night for ourselves, but if we don't play the footy that we know we can, it's going to be a big night for us. So we just got to see how we go, and hopefully he's been training really well this week and put it all together on Friday.
There he is, Cameron Munster, not looking into the hoodoo too much and acting like it doesn't exist, but I know, there he is, the Hamburglar. But deep down, what's he doing? It's just got to be a promo, hasn't it?
God, mate, God, how many more gigs have you got him?
I didn't get a cut out of that, actually. No. So, let's be honest. He knows exactly how significant their record is against them, and I've spoken to him about it. They take a lot of confidence into this. They get, Jerome Hughes comes back into the team, Harry Grant starts as well, and they only beat them last week with really a side that there was hardly any of their first grade team in it. Yep. So they're and they got form too at the moment. Yeah. So, and when you look at Melbourne, they're probably a team you look at that have got improvement in them where there's a lot of others right now that you're thinking have reached their peak. Their time, they run pretty well here, Melbourne.
Well, it's Munster just said it himself. We've got to go out and play the football that we know we can. And what I think Munster's been good this season, but he hasn't been Munster. And I'm just waiting for him to come into a final series and stand up and play those special performances like he's done at Origin.
Yeah.
And if he can do that, I think you've got the closest challenger to Penrith in this moment.
It's a good point you make, because I spoke to Cameron about it. A lot of the emphasis at the moment's been with Jerome because he's been on fire. So Jerome and Katoa on that right edge have been getting all the ball and have been superb. So he's kind of been doing his job but like you said, he hasn't been playing out of the blocks like you usually see. But one thing about Cameron is when the big games come, it's normally when he puts his hand up. And if they're going to focus on Jerome and Katoa, it's perfect for him right on that left-hand side. So I expect him, Gordy, to stand up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And just being a Queenslander, he's a rocky boy coming home, and you just saw his confidence, and he's shooting barbs and her jokes. But you think, like the best thing about Melbourne is I think when you play them, you know what they're going to, like there's no ambush. You know that they're going to be professional. You know that they're going to be hard to beat. You know that Cameron Munster's going to be at his best, and you know that Craig Bellamy's going to have trick shots. So there's no surprise when you play Melbourne Storm. It is the toughest. Like it's no matter where they are on the ladder, it's one of the toughest games you can play.
It's like you said a moment ago too about the Broncos. Like the younger Broncos may not carry the divot, but the flip side of that is for Melbourne, they know the history and they want to own the history.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's almost like when you were showing, you wanted that vision of Adam, and you were pointing to the speedman getting on the outside of him. Well, Munster, if he has a night out, that's where he's going to go, right? He'll try and break down the old fella, the general of the Broncos, as we've seen him do so many times. There was an omission in the Storm lineup, guys, that I found interesting. It's Justin Olam. Yeah. When I think of the destructive Storm, it's Justin Olam. And Craig's gone with Tonamapia. Instead, I just found it an interesting omission and an indication that Olam could be on the way out also.
Well, Olam's been out of form the majority of the year.
He has.
And the guys that have come in the last month have done the job, so I think they're just sticking with